Some of you know that Reddit is one of my favorite social media platforms. I would say closely behind YouTube or tied with YouTube. And I was pretty intrigued when I stumbled upon this subreddit, which gave me lots to discuss in today's video. Before we get into it, I want to very quickly explain what Reddit is because I feel like so many people are so confused by it or overwhelmed by it. Reddit describes itself as a network of communities, so each community is called a subreddit. For example, r/figure skating is a place where you can go to read posts and start conversations about the world of figure skating. And it's a place where I spend a lot of my time on Reddit. Other than YouTube, I prefer reading on social media, so when I go to Reddit, it almost feels like I'm reading my daily newspaper or something like that. Since I often look at the vegan subreddit, I will often get recommended adjacent communities like r/vegan recipes. So when I had this subreddit recommended to me, I was pretty intrigued. It's called exvegans, and it's exactly what you think it is, people who are no longer vegan. It was created in 2019, so it has been around for a few years, and it has around 29,000 members. In this video, we're going to discuss and respond to some of the posts and comments that I found there. My goal of this video isn't to shame anyone or call anyone out. Even though this is a public community, I'm not going to be showing anyone's usernames or anything like that. I want to give a disclaimer on this video. There are some sensitive topics, specifically having to do with eating disorders, that are briefly mentioned, not discussed in depth. But if that is a sensitive topic for you, please take care when watching this video. I do feel like I have a unique perspective on this topic. When I went live with Vegan, of course, he called me an XX-vegan, which I had never been called before, but it fits, it's the truth. Those of you familiar with my vegan journey know that it wasn't linear. I basically had 3 years where I was vegan. I ate a vegan diet, I called myself vegan, felt like I was vegan, and then took a break from it before coming back. There's a lot of nuance in my story. If you're curious, watch my vegan journey video. But because of this, I think I'm a good person to examine some of these ex-vegan posts with compassion, but also with the ability to call out BS when I see it, which I will be doing a lot of in this video. The cover photo of r/ex-vegans is cows with ear tags on, I guess really embracing cows being exploited as their welcoming image. So let's get into our posts, starting off with a really wild one. There's a lot to discuss at this one. It's titled, "Yesterday a vegan attacked me for comparing veganism to a cult and I deleted my post because I don't like conflict, but ... The flair on this one, which is basically a way of categorizing the posts, is rant.
So yesterday I made 2 posts about the cognitive dissonance I experienced as a vegan, and the second being how I personally felt that leaving veganism was like leaving a cult. A vegan commented saying that it was offensive that I said this and dismissive towards people's experiences in a cult.
I agree with this point.
And that there is no brainwashing in the vegan movement. They then said that you wouldn't call people against homelessness a cult, etc.
Also a good point by that vegan.
Completely ignoring what I said. I was thinking about this in my own experience. I was vegan for 10 years, and I can confidently say I was brainwashed. Yes, there is no, quote, leader of veganism, but there are people who are in influential positions that espouse harmful misinformation, and there are vegan communities, both online and in person, that people get caught up in. I was in both. I personally fully believed everything people like Freely said. I thought she was healthy.
The post goes on to explain that the person has a form of epilepsy caused by Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and they name that as being the primary reason they stopped eating vegan. So I have nothing to say about that part of the post. I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to tell anyone what they should or should not do based on their medical conditions. But I want to talk about the first part because there's a lot there. So in short, it sounds like this person was more in the cult of Freely than anything else. I personally fully believed everything people like Freely said. For those who don't know Freely, she is a raw food YouTuber that feels like she's been around since the dawn of time, but certainly since basically the dawn of YouTube. There are plenty of YouTube videos that go in depth talking about Freely, so I'm not going to do that here. I feel bad for people whose entire worldview of veganism is through the lens of raw vegan YouTubers, some of whom might be vegan for the animals, but many of whom are eating diets that just happen to be vegan for purported health reasons. Let's talk about the top comment on this post. even more to unpack in this comment than in the post itself.
Veganism is absolutely a cult, I have no doubt of this. I've also known people in cults and the similarities are mind-blowing. Here's the thing, no one in a cult thinks they're in a cult.
This is something I have considered before as a thought exercise. I'm really interested in cults, and I have heard people refer to veganism as one. My conclusion is that it's not a cult, but let's get into this person's reasoning.
Vegan ideology and the people/groups pushing it are the leader.
This is already flawed logic because one of the defining characteristics of a cult is having a charismatic leader. Keith Raniere, Jim Jones, Charles Manson, etc. So for the sake of this person's exercise, they want us to believe that millions of people are the charismatic leader. Okay.
Absolute authoritarianism without accountability. Obvious similarity with veganism.
I've looked at the definition of authoritarianism. Abstaining from eating the byproducts of animal suffering doesn't really feel to me like it fits in with the definition, but okay.
Zero tolerance for criticism or questions. Obvious similarity with veganism.
Part of the vegan experience is accepting and expecting endless criticism and questions. We are constantly tolerating shit.
Lack of meaningful financial disclosure regarding budget. This applies to the extremely biased vegan media produced. Most have connections with big business pushing their vegan products and rarely disclose details like this.
This is so convoluted and such a stretch. Keep in mind, the way most cults operate is that they take endless amounts of money from their members and then there's no disclosure about where that money goes. That's where the lack of disclosure comes in. They're also doing things like money laundering and tax evasion. That's where the lack of disclosure comes in. So far, I've yet to be presented a bill for my yearly vegan dues. I don't know, maybe this year I'll get one. If you're implying that PETA or the Humane Society are the cult leaders of veganism, they simply wouldn't be allowed to get away with that because they are registered nonprofit charities that literally have to be transparent about where the money is going.
Unreasonable fears about the outside world that involve evil conspiracies and persecutions. Obvious similarity with veganism.
I have said this before, unfortunately, a lot of the truths about animal agriculture feel like conspiracies. It sounds wild to be like, wait, the dairy industry is partnering with Taco Bell and the Mayo Clinic to push dairy onto the public? But there it is on the official US government websites. Most people are so systematically isolated from the realities of animal agriculture through things like ag-gag laws. A lot of these realities sound like they're made up because most people can't fathom how humans could be so cruel on such a mass scale.
A belief that former followers are always wrong for leaving and there is never a legitimate reason for anyone else to leave. Obvious similarity with veganism.
Personally, I don't think that there's never a legitimate reason to leave veganism. Obviously, there are medical issues like the original poster described, but I think cases like this are the minority, and I think most people who leave veganism are doing it because they simply don't want to do it anymore. And that's where they might get called out or questioned.
Abusive members, vegan on vegan hateful comments, etc.
In cults, we're often talking about severe, horrific cases of sexual assault, extortion, forced labor, and other things that can send the leader to prison for multiple life sentences. A vegan saying a hateful comment to another vegan, I'm not even sure what type of comment that would be, but let's say it's someone questioning someone's reason for no longer being vegan. Are we really going to compare that to the severe cases of abuse I just mentioned?
Records, books, articles, or programs documenting the abuses of the leader or group. Really obvious similarity with veganism. Replace leader with animals and influencers.
This person is literally making an argument for veganism and against carnism. There are records of books, articles, programs documenting the abuses of farm animals and the human workers involved. I don't know what this person thought they were doing here, but they were literally making our argument for us.
Followers feeling they are never able to be good enough. Obvious similarity with veganism.
The parameters of veganism are pretty clear. If you follow them, great. If not, you may not be considered vegan.
A belief that the leader is right at all times. Obvious similarity with veganism. Apply it to vegan propaganda, influencers, etc.
Again, because there is no one leader, I don't see how this can be argued.
A belief that the leader is the exclusive means of knowing truth or giving validation. Obvious similarity with vegan claims in media, etc.
Again, since there is no one leader, there's not just one source of validation or information. The only universal truth is believing that animals should not be harmed or exploited for human pleasure. pleasure. The original poster, or OP, responded with,
"This is perfect. It literally sums up veganism." Just specifically with the followers could never be good enough point, I see that so often in the vegan world and with myself. I believed veganism was a stepladder: junk food vegan, whole food vegan, raw till 4, raw, frugivore. Specifically vegans I've noticed who never feel good enough is Freely, Mommy Tang, Fully Raw Christina, and all other vegans who bounce between raw and cooked vegan. I watched Mommy Tang for years and she spoke about going whole food vegan. So she went whole food vegan recently, but now is on a raw diet with lots of juicing. And the same with Freely. Freely was raw till 4, fully raw, and back to raw till 4, and then back to fully raw again now. She always disappears for long periods of time. It's this constant feeling of not being optimal enough. I always thought that the reason why I don't like raw food is because I've been conditioned to eat cooked food.
While I sympathize with this commenter for never feeling like they could be good enough, this entire comment has nothing to do with veganism. Obviously, veganism is not a stepladder starting with junk food vegan and ending with frugivore. I wish there was a way of letting people know that there are other vegan influencers outside of this extremely narrow world of raw vegan YouTubers. Like, I wish these channels came with disclaimers. Like, disclaimer, this is a very specific type of vegan diet that most vegans do not adhere to. There are many other ways to eat, and maybe YouTube should require people to watch a few other different types of vegan channels before they're allowed to binge on this one type of YouTube content. There are so many vegans represented online who are eating in so many different ways that to limit your purview of veganism to a few people following extremely restrictive diets, that's kind of a user error. Let's go to the next post. Dear any ex-vegans who have read his book, does this book make you win against meat eaters in any arguments? This is under the questions flare. This was about Earthling Ed, aka Ed Winter's book, How to Argue with a Meat Eater and Win Every Time. I'm not super familiar with Earthling Ed, but from what I've seen, he does a lot of these sort of talks or debates about how to combat arguments against veganism. This is the top comment.
All vegan arguments, and his in particular, come down to, I can list what I call contradictions in your thinking and thus find you guilty of cognitive dissonance. They all rely on the assumption that there is a contradiction or cognitive dissonance in loving some animals and eating others. That's like arguing, since you love humans, you must love all of them equally.
No, it's not. The human equivalent would be, if you love or respect humans, you should agree that you can't kill some of them for pleasure while claiming to love others. Starting off the comment with a horrible example.
It takes no effort to find documentaries depicting various carnivores from house cats to lions forming friendships with other species despite continuing to eat meat. Life forms are perfectly capable of befriending members of other species and of eating members of other species. Fiction with sapient animals like the original Mowgli series in the Jungle Book depict animals understanding predators need to eat and not taking it personally. They're not happy to get eaten, they still try to avoid it and survive. They just accept that's the world they live in. What else can you do?
So just to be clear, we're using the Jungle Book to logically explain that cognitive dissonance doesn't exist. I just want to clarify what just happened there in case you dissociated and thought you were living in an alternative universe. Also, what we're doing is we're comparing humans to carnivores that live in the wild, like lions.
Just because 1% of people think someone shouldn't be capable of doing 2 certain things at once doesn't make it true. Some heterotrophs can't get any or enough of their nutrients from organisms like grass. These same heterotrophs with these limitations are also capable of forming friendships with members of other species. This limitation and this capability do exist in the same creature, so it's obviously not a contradiction. The vegan argument that cognitive dissonance is bad does not stop having a brain too large to get enough nutrients from plants only and the ability to form friendships with other species from occurring in the same organism, nor does it make Homo sapiens' gut and brain capable of running only on plants.
Whew. Huh.
These guides to vegan debate all start with a false assumption.
This person took a few scientific terms, tossed them up into a word salad, and successfully tricked 24 people into thinking it's a sound argument. Here's the thing. We're not talking about whether or not humans are capable of doing 2 things at once, i.e. claiming to love some animals while eating others. It's not about capability. It's about, is it morally and ethically sound? Are you actually okay with doing that when you really think about it? These qualities that you love so much in dogs and cats have all the important similarities that you care about or that people seem to think gives an animal a worthy individuality as these other animals you're paying to have slaughtered. That's what these types of vegan arguments are trying to point out. Not, oh, are we capable of it? Do we have the capability? Of course we have the capability. The 92 billion animals killed every year for food are evidence of that. The question is, are you actually okay with it when you really connect to it? Let's move on to the next post. It doesn't taste the same, and this is under the debunking vegan propaganda flare. The OP was vegetarian for 12 years, then went back to eating meat, and then ate an Impossible Burger for the first time.
It was my first Impossible Burger since eating the real thing. It tastes like emptiness. It was my first time feeling sad while eating food. The flavor and texture are very different. I really thought it tasted the same.
The top comment on this one is, it tastes like emptiness, laughing face. That's because that's what it is. No, it's not. It's literally not emptiness. It's not fake food, it's not air. That's what emptiness would be. It's not even empty calories. It's actually 19 grams of protein, which is the same as 80-20 beef, 25% of the daily value of iron, as well as many other vitamins and nutrients. I'm not saying it's a health food, I'm just saying it's literally not emptiness. Another comment,
it's crazy what the brain will do to keep itself mentally stable. People can convince themselves of anything to keep them sane, especially with a hint of peer pressure, gaslighting, and proverbial greenwashing.
I feel like this describes to a T the experience of eating animal products. The human brain will tell you whatever you need to hear to keep you sane. How many times have you heard meat eaters say, I can't think about what I'm actually eating, or I'll get too upset, grossed out, etc. Because I've heard that a lot, and in fact, I used to be one of them. Also, peer pressure, gaslighting, brainwashing all sound like things that vegans experience on a regular basis as part of a carnist-centric world. The comment goes on,
biggest example, children of abusive parents. Many grow up still idolizing their parents because their brain does that to keep them from truly coming to terms with the fact that their abusive parent hated them and hurt them for pleasure.
This was really alarming to read, comparing veganism to abusive parenting, claiming that vegans hurt themselves for pleasure. It's just so backwards, obviously, because humans abuse and hurt animals for their own pleasure. So to use that argument against veganism is pretty baffling to me. In general, yeah, I think you do adjust to vegan food being different and it becomes a new normal in a sense, but I don't think that makes it a bad thing. When I first went vegan, if someone had said to me, hey, you know, your favorite dairy food is sharp cheddar cheese, here's the vegan alternative, and I tried it, I probably would be like, yeah, it doesn't really taste like that, and maybe I don't like it as much. But as your brain and taste buds and body adjust to this new compassionate diet that you've chosen, a lot of things change. Maybe you start liking foods you didn't like before. Maybe your idea of delicious changes. I can confidently say that I've never enjoyed food more than I do now. I've never had a better relationship with food than I do now. And sure, maybe that's me being gaslit by my morals, but as long as I'm happy with what I'm eating and actively reducing harm to other living beings, who gives a shit? Let's move on. Others who struggled with severe animal product phobia, how did you overcome it? And this is under the reintroducing animal foods flare.
In my mind, I do not see meat or animal products as food. What you may see as a bag of cheese, I see as cow hair. What you see as a person dipping a cookie in a glass of milk, I see someone dipping a cookie in an unflushed public toilet. The reaction you would have to those gross things is what I have to animal products, nausea and disgust. And if someone tried to feed it to you, your mind would sound alarm bells and say, get away, that's disgusting. And if you did consume it, you'd vomit or want to vomit. I have been wanting to become normal and not vegan again for over a year. I made a gradual exposure tier list about a year ago of the least scary to most scary animal products, starting with something like a single piece of honey granola, then two, then a few more, then a drop of real honey, then Brave Robot ice cream, etc.
This post goes on, but that's the gist of it. Obviously, saying I want to be normal again stands out. I think that's what quitting veganism boils down to for a lot of people. It's just too hard for some people to maintain a vegan lifestyle in an overbearingly carnist world. I do think it's important to acknowledge that veganism can vary in its level of difficulty depending on a lot of different factors. For example, I would imagine it's way harder to be a vegan teenager in a not vegan friendly family than it would be to be a vegan adult with a job living on your own. Also, the part about not seeing animal products as food, but as this disgusting other thing, I totally relate to that. That's something I've heard a lot of other vegans say as well, is that animal body parts and byproducts just no longer feel like food. Once that spell is broken, it can be hard to unbreak it, although plenty of people seem to manage to do it just fine. Here's the top comment.
What you are describing sounds like a serious eating disorder. I know you don't want to hear it, but therapy would probably help. Think of it like deprogramming from a religious cult. I would completely stop absorbing any form of vegan propaganda. It is designed to do this to people. Deep emotional manipulation using misinformation with no thought or care of the target's well-being.
Firstly, no thought or care of the target's well-being sounds more like carnism than veganism. Again, with the cult reference, I would say most vegans feel like they've escaped from a cult when they wake up to the reality of the food industry and what the animals go through. As for the eating disorder aspect, the OP said they can't go to therapy, and I think it's really dangerous and irresponsible to throw around an eating disorder diagnosis in a Reddit comment. That being said, there have been accounts I've heard anecdotally of people using restrictive diets like veganism as a shield for their eating disorder, or people already having an eating disorder and veganism heightening it. It certainly doesn't help that veganism is so often conflated with diet culture. So if that's what the original poster is dealing with, I wish them the best. As for the commenters diagnosing this person with all different types of mental illnesses, I would really encourage them to be a lot more cautious and responsible with their Reddit comments, especially because people who come to Reddit forums looking for advice are oftentimes younger people who don't have anyone else to turn to. Next post, been veg for 10 years, but I'm just over it, under the I'm doubting veganism flare.
I went vegetarian when I was 14. I am 24 now. I originally lied to others by saying it was for the animals. Then I said it was for health. The real reason I wouldn't say to anyone was because I thought it would make me skinny. I watched raw vegan YouTubers, all of which definitely had full-blown eating disorders, and I took tips from them. By the time I moved out, I had developed a full-fledged eating disorder that lasted until I hit about 22. I've worked a lot the past few years to heal myself and my relationship with food, but I've still held on to being vegetarian, honestly out of habit, just because I have done it for so long. I still have days where I fall into old habits or ways of thinking, and I'm starting to think I can never fully heal myself if I am allowing myself to restrict in any way.
Yet another victim of watching the raw vegan YouTubers. Again, I have empathy and sympathy for this person, and I wish them the best in their recovery, but this post has nothing to do with veganism. It seems like OP was vegetarian and struggling with an eating disorder and was maybe influenced by some raw vegan YouTubers, but again, sounded like they themselves were never vegan. I feel like this is a good time to bring up the fact that the prefrontal cortex of the human brain is not considered to be fully developed until around the age of 25. I'm not saying no one can become vegan before that age, but I am saying it shouldn't be a huge surprise when someone goes through a few different iterations or trials and errors of their diet or lifestyle before that age. Like I said, I wish this person the best, but this post being on an ex-vegan forum, I fear gives more misguided credence to the misconception that veganism causes eating disorders. Next post, libido for the first time in my life, under the life after veganism flare.
I'm an almost 31-year-old woman. I've always struggled with my sexuality and never felt like I had a sexual attraction to anyone. I never had any sort of sex drive or desire. I started eating a lot of animal products 4 months ago after being vegan for 7 years and mostly vegan for many years before that. Then I got in a new relationship 2 months ago. For the first time in my life, I have a sex drive and feel excited about being intimate with my partner. It's amazing to be able to fully present with my boyfriend because it's always something I've never really understood.
I mean, if we're to believe all of the documentaries where they've done libido and sexual arousal tests on people on plant-based diets versus not, it would not appear that vegan diets negatively impact libido. Someone commented, "Your hormones are working now. All the human sex hormones are made out of cholesterol." This comment comes across as really ignorant. The human body produces all the cholesterol that it needs. You don't need to eat excess cholesterol in the diet. I'm not telling this poster that she's wrong. She's simply sharing her experience, but I do believe there's more to libido than simply a person's diet, so I'm not convinced that eating animal products magically made her horny again. And our last post, no longer vegan after 10 years under the reintroducing animal foods flare. Basically, this person was vegan and then started incorporating animal products when she got pregnant.
I was vegan from age 19. I can't help but wonder how my 20s may have been different if I'd been nourished differently. The biggest thing is my libido. libido. Has always been low, I hate it, and although I've tried so many ways to improve it, I can't. It hasn't necessarily improved since eating more animal products, but I also had a baby. I'm just looking back at my timeline. I had an eating disorder from age 17 to 22, vegan from age 19 to 29. So many years of starving or malnourishment. Could I expect this to change if I eat differently? What would a realistic healthy day of eating animal products even look like? My omnivorous days feel so far away, I don't feel intuitive towards that style of eating. I want to feel nourished and like there is vitality in my body and a flipping libido.
So again, someone deciding to go vegan in the midst of having an eating disorder, did that impact the decision at all? Obviously, I don't know, but there is a correlation here. Someone commented,
"Here is just a thought. Go visit a farmer's market and see if any of the prepared food there speaks to you. It can give you a warm, fuzzy feeling to have that connection to the people who worked the land and produced your food."
Yeah, I love farmers markets and they do give a warm and fuzzy feeling. But this comment is essentially just promoting humane washing. It helps when you can associate a warm and fuzzy feeling with your animal exploitation. Someone else commented,
"Often libido is linked to psychological stuff rather than nutrition, so it might be worth exploring your relationship and any body image issues. There could be something there holding you back. I had a terrible libido with my ex because he was so critical and distant, and it was hard to get in the mood when I didn't feel an emotional connection other than trying not to annoy him. Sometimes I'd just go through the motions to keep the peace, even though I felt like crawling into my shell. After we split, my libido returned. Something to think about."
This is in line with a point I made in the earlier post, so I was happy to see someone comment that here. With this person, it sounds like they have multiple different things going on. Again, I'm not convinced those things are all associated with veganism. There are so many more interesting posts, but that's it for the ones that I picked to discuss. I would say anyone who has committed to a major shift in their life is going to be looking for validation that they made the right decision. And a lot of what I'm seeing in the ex-vegan subreddit falls in this category. Newly ex-vegans trying to grapple with this major decision they've made, or looking for justification for their decision. I also guarantee there's a good number of people in this subreddit who were never vegan at all and just looking to pile on to the anti-vegan rhetoric. I can also pretty much guarantee that there are some people in this subreddit who will find their way back to veganism, just like so many other people have done, just like I did. So I hope this gives all of us some food for thought, maybe encourages us to be gentle with people while they're finding their way, especially when they're young, especially when they've been misled or confused. One thing I take from all of this is how important it is to be constantly clarifying and educating people on what veganism truly means, because it gets so misconstrued by the public and by the media, even by people who claim to be vegan. Give this video a thumbs up if it gave you some food for thought. Let me know what you thought of all these different posts and comments. Subscribe for more of my videos, tap the bell to be notified when I upload, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!